Hello and welcome to Breaking Culture Live. I'm your host, Sean Johnson Andrews. I'm the immediate past president. Oh no, I'm not. I'm not even the immediate past president anymore. I'm a past president of the Cultural Studies Association. Now we have another immediate past president, and we're speaking today with the current president of the Cultural Studies Association, Delores Phillips. Thank you for joining us today, Delores.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts. So the invitation was, it's actually flattering.
Well, no, it's great to talk to you. And just to give a little bit of a bio here, Dolores is the director of the African American and Diaspora Studies Center and associate professor of English at James Madison University. She specializes in postcolonial literature and theory with a focus on food and waste studies and digital cultures. Her publications appear in Cultural Critique, Narrative Cultures, the Routledge Handbook of African Literature, Postcolonial Studies, Food and Feminism, and other venues. And I know you've also done a lot of work with the podcast for the Cultural Studies Association positions, so that people can check out the lateral website and find you on several of those positions podcasts. So I failed to also mention, or I guess what I came here to mention was that you are president of the Cultural Studies Association. But before you were president, Dolores has been instrumental in helping run the organization, particularly our virtual and hybrid conferences. So we'll talk more about that at the end of the show. Dolores and I have spent many hours managing Zoom rooms and helping presenters get and share their slides, and especially their audio, which is always a difficult thing. And she's always better at monitoring the Discord channel, which makes sense as she is a key member of the New Media and Digital Cultures group and a frequent gamer, I believe, or at
Oh, yeah.
least a
Yes.
sometime gamer.
Not
I don't
as
know.
frequent as I would like to lately, because
Okay.
I've been kept running on some ways that I would love to talk about later when we talk about what the center does. But
Okay.
I am a keen gamer.
Keen gamer.
Yes.
Um, well, we have a lot to talk about today, but I want to start with your research and your writing. A lot of your early work is on food and foodways, as well as video games and game cultures. But you're now turning to the waste that is left at the end of these. In the paper you shared, you say you're working from Mbembe's necropolitics by expanding it to what you were calling copropolitics, uh, which are the game's death worlds as waste worlds, where swaths of people and objects are rendered excremental, disposable, impermanent, and also fungible. So tell us more about this concept. How did you get into this shit?
Oh yeah. I love talking about how I got into this shit. I got into it actually in my doctoral work. I was working on a dissertation that had to do with that was in my original field of romanticism, but I was finding it tricky to get into that particular sphere of thinking about history and thinking about failure is what I was really preoccupied by at the time. So I've always been interested in things like failure, fragmentation, incompletion,
Mm,
those kinds of economies. And I ended up writing this paper about culture and about food culture in a memoir and a cookbook, an autobiographical cookbook. And I noticed what was being trimmed. Just as you trim fat off of a piece of chicken, so too do we trim the unsavory historical bits from a lot of the food cultures that we
mm,
talk about, or you gloss over it. I mean, you're not going to find a cookbook that actually talks explicitly about shit. I mean, that's very tricky to find, I think. But I was very interested in what gets left out, what gets left behind. I was instead of thinking of it as inaccuracy, I began thinking of it as cultural cleansing.
mm,
Cultural, and by cleansing, I don't mean that. I mean cultural cleansing in terms of purgation. I mean it in terms of trimming. I mean it in terms of sanitization. So those sanitary fixations began
mm-hmm,
to creep into my work, and so I really desired to complete an elementary trajectory of consumption to expulsion. So in the dissertation that I ended up writing that had to do with postcolonial studies, I was very intrigued by the connectivity between food and waste, the way that the body is both segregate the way that the sort of deconstruction of the body, where it both segregates but also brings together the culinary and the
Mm.
excretory. And so my work began gravitating in those directions. I got into cannibalism for a brief moment. I have an
I'm
article.
reading about it.
Uh, uh, Maybe. We don't talk about those things on Breaking Cultures. Um, but I think in that particular article, I was looking at how we need to sanitize our historical records by writing out things like cannibalism. And I was looking
Mm.
specifically at the food exhibit in the National Museum of American History, as well as an exhibit about Jane, who was found, whose cannibalized head was found at Jamestown. So I think about cannibalism and consumption.
Sure.
I'm still working through The Delectable Negro, which came out in a very timely way for my work. I think about the consumability, Bell Hooks's observations about the consumability of Black bodies. So I got really into those kinds of things, but
Sure.
I also was deeply informed by Dominique Laporte's History of Shit. And he
Right.
speaks of shit, those as being circulated back into modes and circuits of production. So shit becomes the coin of the realm. I'm interested in when that doesn't happen. What is
Mm.
left over, what is left out. And so Jed Esty and Warwick Anderson are also really impactful for me in terms of how they think about extraneity, how they think about um, hollowed out bodies, hollowed out, the way the person can become a hollowed out walking corpse as everything of
Mm.
value has been evacuated from that person. So that's how I got into the shit that
Into
led
the shit.
to what I wrote for the most recent Southwest Popular and Cultural Studies Association conference, which is the paper that I shared that has to do with copropolitics, which is an idea that took form for me as I began thinking about necropolitics in the game and the way that death worlds, especially in video games, are constructed. But in Cyberpunk 2077, there is a logic of e-waste that makes the copropolitical really important to think about, with who is discarded, who is discardable, what gets
Right.
discarded and what gets preserved. So that was kind of how that sort of funneled in. I've always been a discontented foodie because it feels like I have all this training in postcolonial studies and we think very incisively about economies and bodies and different kinds of, differential power dynamics. And then, but as soon as you put a lovely plate of lumpia in front of me, all that goes out the window. And I am suddenly a cultural expert because I know how to order something from a Viet menu and know exactly what I'm ordering, since I know just enough of the language to understand what's on the menu, but I can't have an actual
Right.
conversation with a person. So it seems like all of these habits of mine just sort of get discarded when we start thinking about food cultures. And I was
Yeah,
always
totally.
discontented with that. And instead, so I gravitated toward cultural, toward culinary colonialism. Started thinking a lot about Lucy Long and Lisa Helka's work in those along those avenues of how our subject positions end up really welcoming us into dynamics of power that we may not recognize or see or even see that become invisible because of the way that food culture works. So I want to bring in what we don't want to talk about. I was working in
Yeah.
bodily fluids for a
That,
minute because there is a wonderful book by Paul Fotenhauer. He has two. One is Natural Harvest, and the other is Semenology, and both are about cooking with semen. So I went in that.
cooking with semen.
Yes, cooking with semen.
That's new. I haven't heard of that. That
Well, it's intended to bring together oral sensual cultures with
okay.
and there's Aphrodite is a memoir of the senses by Isabel Allende, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, and it's how to stage an orgy. So what is the sort of,
Yeah.
I would say, natural evolution, but what is somehow so different about staging an orgy in one book and then cooking with bodily fluids in another book? It
Well,
just,
but that the cooking with body fluids kind of reverses that, right?
yes,
That's the stuff you can use, right?
that's the stuff that
Or the
you can
stuff
use.
that you can make like sensual, making your sensual fluids into a sensual dish, I guess,
Right.
is what that would be about.
And
Which is
photography gorgeous. I mean, it
Yeah.
has a picture of a beautiful flan on the cover of Natural
Okay.
Harvest, if you
All
get the
right.
right edition. But where does disgust come in terms of being a segregating factor between what we accept, what we will talk about, even in the ivory tower, and what we don't
Yeah.
want to talk about? My work is purposefully provocative. It is purposefully disgusting. It's intended to offend. It's intended to, I mean, Bataille is one of my deepest influences. I love Bataille so much because of that welcoming of the Yezuve, for example, into these beautiful palette. I mean, his writing is gorgeous. And then on top of that, I had very good translations. I think because I have not read him in the original French, unfortunately, but I need to because I am sure that if it is as electrifying in the translation, then it must be even more so in the original. But his just the different kinds of the palette he uses to depict these concepts of waste and excrementality and disgust is something that I want to welcome really deeply into my own work, and I want to welcome it not into the mainstream, but I want to use it to challenge orthodoxies that we hold about culture and about our various our intimate relationships with various things that have to do with the body, like ingestion, like sexuality, like sensuality. So I want to play with those by invoking disgust.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right. It is something that's sort of cordoned off to one side. I had a very meta moment this morning. I was telling you, as I was reading your work and preparing for the show, I had to snake one of our drains because it was clogged. So I was reading your essay, and I was reading the section of Mike Davis's Planet of the Slums where he talks about living in shit and the way the lack of sanitation and proper water treatment is a legacy of colonialism. And that, I mean, even in reading that section, it's kind of amazing that this doesn't come up more, that they're really that like whole swaths of the world are just dealing with this excrement that's basically the problem that is created from the colonial construction of these cities in these urban areas.
And
So
I don't understand why that would be a dirty subject in a lot of ways. I mean, we talk about colonial legacies all the time with things like the broken library in a small place. I mean, we
yeah,
think about these different sorts of colonial remnants. So why wouldn't the thing that deals with our personal remnants not be on the forefront, except for the fact that we don't want to talk about shit? And I don't know that we don't want to talk about these things. We don't want to talk about what happens in our bathrooms. I mean, why else are our bathrooms and kitchens glisteningly white? Why do we prefer white tile in these spaces? Because and when we think
yeah.
about even the way that toilets are, nobody wants to have a shit brown toilet in the place where they're actually shitting, which is, I think, perfectly apropos. I love that you were
Yeah.
snaking your drain at the time. But I think when we think about sanitation and proper water treatment as a legacy of colonialism, I think that's actually really a potent way to think about how those spaces are disordered and
Mm.
how they become diseased spaces and what kind of referendum it makes on the continuing aftermath of the colonial rupture. It isn't really that ruptured because the same orthodoxies and the same kinds of social stratifications, they persist.
Oh, yeah. No, and they've been there for a long time, and I mean, a lot often the way that gets sort of framed is that then you have this notion from Donald Trump saying, "Well, these are shithole countries," and you're kind of like, "Well, but how did that happen? Where did that
Well,
where did that come from? What's
and
what's
and
the what
what
is
is our
this?
causality in it?
What
Like,
is
what
the
is our
causality here?"
yeah,
Yeah,
what is our causality? And what role do we play in keeping them shit countries? I think about Haiti and its debt service and how
yeah,
that ended up making Haiti, which was freed. It's a freed nation. It was a
yeah.
nation that shook off the shackles of slavery on its, pretty much on its own terms, but then was exiled from the global marketplace and wasn't able to ever stand economically on its own 2 feet and had to do enormous reparation to slaveholders for
Yeah.
uh, for
Still, I
for
mean, it's
taking
still
yeah.
there, right?
I think it just ended.
Did
Um,
it?
I want to say it did. I'll have to look into that. Um, but the notion of having a place that freed itself then have to pay for that freedom by
Mhm.
compensating others, for the labor that they stole. It's mind-boggling. So these perverse logics, yeah, absolutely. It really is like, how did we get here? How do you know? And how are these things continuing referendums on our history and our behavior? And I think about that collectively a lot.
Well, and the essay that you shared with me is actually looking uh, ahead to the future, or at least to the sci-fi future in the video game Cyberpunk 2077, which is, I guess, a good metaphor for thinking about these. I confess, I don't know much about the game, but in reading on it, I found it interesting that one of the three possible life paths for the gameplay is called the Corpo life path. This is where the character begins their story as a high-level employee of the Arasaka Corporation. And I couldn't help but notice there's only a small difference between corpo and corporo. So what do you see as the relationship between the cop or is it copro politics and corpo politics?
Man, I wish I had thought of that when I was writing this paper, but that slipped
You're free to use it. You're free to use
me.
it in the next iteration.
I thank you for this gift. But copper politics is related to corpo politics in that the corpo politics of the game actually stratify and manage the copro politics of
Mm,
who is left as excremental. The game is very conscious in many different ways, and the copper politics of it, I think, is one of those ways. Who is actually turned into living excrement? Who is made excremental? The way the game is aesthetically organized. There's a city center and there's garbage and nomads all around this periphery. There's literal altitudes where the higher, and there's a beautiful cinematic where one of the characters gets into a flying car and then
mhm.
is whisked above the city and then remarks on how beautiful it is because you cannot see all of the dregs of human life that are literally down below. And then meanwhile, Pacifica is still Pacifica. And the idea of litter. There's all kinds of litter all over the place. So who is it that organizes those spaces? How are those spaces constructed? How are they segregated? And the game is very clear, as most games are, in terms of different districts that become almost like biomes. And in those
Mm,
biomes, it's pretty clear that our corporate overlords are governing us and are determining whose life is worth even saving. In the game, there's a private health service that if you get hurt, you have to pay basically a subscription for them to come out and save you, and they will check your credit balance before they even scrape you off the pavement. And so it's riffing on how our for-profit healthcare industry works and how that in turn determines who is savable, who is salvageable, and who is not. So that and the game also has implants that where people are actually being abducted and having their implants stolen from them and
oh,
stripped from
geez.
their bodies. I know it's such a magical world of
Well,
horrifying
and an
things happening
allegory. I
to the
mean, there's
body.
a lot of ways that it's just an allegory for what we're living through. It's not,
Totally. I
it
mean,
isn't.
yeah, it's such
It's
a
only
rich
like
allegory.
just a little bit adjacent to
It's
what we're talking about.
and sometimes totally on the nose. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's this, the idea that they live in an oligarchy in which massive multinational corporations are governing entities that have determined based on capitalist flows who matters and who doesn't. So
Yeah.
the corpo political is, I think, a massive governing ethos in the game
Mm,
that in turn organizes the copro politics
right.
of the endeavor.
Well, and there's a really important point in the article that I think is sort of relevant also to the atmosphere that we're living in today, which is where you note that data becomes more important than the body, or the data about the person or about the individual becomes more important than the body. And this reminded me, I was chatting with Ben Tarnoff and Quinn Slobodian, the authors of Muskism in the spring. And one of the themes that they speak to in Musk's ideology, Elon Musk, is the combination of believing in the power of these massive data sets. And, we need to kind of have this massive data set that will then teach the AI how to think more correctly. These are produced by these large agglomerations of people, but then in the same turn, he devalues those people that he doesn't find value, and he often uses the term NPC, so non-playing characters, to describe everyone who's like not someone like him. So this video game and video games seem a perfect space to explore both the corpo and the copro politics
Oh,
that
definitely.
we're living in.
And by extension, issues of bioinformation and bioinformatics and how we convert people into data and then what we do with that data and who owns that data. I think what's most terrifying about the way that or what's most unsettling, and by unsettling, I mean that along a bunch of different registers, about the way that AI is disrupting in a bunch of different registers human life, is that it's being managed by these techno overlords, right? I mean,
Right.
it's definitely embedded very deeply into capitalist modes of extraction and extraction, expulsion, and expropriation. So
Yeah.
it's managed, it's within that logic, and I think that's the reason why it's so deeply unsettling for a lot of people, and why nobody really trusts it. If you've been working with it, and I mean, we say that it's hallucinating, and so we think about it along the vector of truth and truthful telling, truthful exchange of information, but really one of the most unsettling things about it is that it's serving moneyed interests, and so it's not going to serve you. And so we've got
Yeah.
this sort of pipe dream that AI will somehow liberate us, when instead it relies on the conversion of rare books into waste paper, when it relies on the swallowing of personal information, and the information attached to your life is fed upon, literally
Mhm.
fed into the machinery of AI. So this particular game, it plays with that notion because AI and personhood are very deeply intertwined. So there is a kind of personness that artificial people have been granted, both the engram that exists in your head that is steadily trying to take you over, that you yourself become data that can be overwritten. And then you've got this car that it's a taxi service that has an actual AI that itself is fragmented, and you have to reunify it by going out and collecting all of its wayward kinfolk in this quest line that has you interacting with these AIs that are having personal crises that are very much in line with the kinds of
Right.
personal crises that natural born people actually have. So it's this it's the tug, I think, when I think about the use of the word NPC and the populations that associate that with people, it's so
Right.
deeply solipsistic. It's obviously embedded in the kinds of logics of racial and gender capital that we are deeply accustomed to, that can be so damaging to interpersonal sociality. This the use of the NPC and how discardable they are is definitely a point that's apropos. And the idea of the NPC as serving the needs of the player character. How is the oligarchy communicating to us that we are intended to serve, to only live to serve those needs? But don't we all think that we're player characters? Is the NPC, like, are you really going to be content to be an NPC? The NPC is there's a book, The One versus the Many, and it's
Okay.
by Wallach, and Wolloch. And that book is about how minor characters support the plot. I mean, it's all about it's very much a Marxist and economical kind of read, if I remember it correctly.
This is a
But
literary studies
literary
text.
studies, yes, it's study of the novel. So, but it still works to think about, if you're using that logic of the NPC to describe human life, what are you saying about player characters, NPCs, and the economies of labor that prop everything up, and who is, of course, made to do the laboring versus who gets to benefit from that labor.
Yeah.
The player character gets the illusion of laboring because it's really the NPCs that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So I mean, I think about these quite often just because of how discardable that language suggests people really are, which is deeply unfortunate.
I mean, that whole narrative seems to get flipped I mean, as I think about this in terms of like the Victorian novel or something, or, I think one of the themes we've seen emerge in, especially in kind of televisual depictions of the British upper class, is you see now you have all of these depictions of what's going on at, in the, what is it, the other side of the house. I forget if it's the, basically like
Upstairs, downstairs,
the
right?
upstairs, downstairs. I think I was trying
Yes.
to think, what is it? Downstairs. Yeah, the upstairs, down.
Yes.
So you have the Downton Abbey. You have all of these folks who in earlier novels might have been the NPCs, but now they're like, no, these are actually the people who are making everything run. this is
And
this is this is the people whose labor make this function.
the best measure of a good servant is how invisible that servant is, how
Sure.
they melt, and how the machinery that creates your experience just melts away from you. And all you have is the experience and don't have to see the hands that are making the experience happen. The NPC actually makes that vividly aware, and you're aware that yes, I am exploiting this person that's in front of me. So what does that, what does that mean in terms of my own ethical contiguity? Oh, well, I have to make them an unperson. I have to make them into a non-entity. I have to make them into simply a cog in a system, as opposed to seeing their personhood. So there's all these weird negotiations of personhood, and I think that also attends to my larger interest in waste and shit. Because
Yeah,
when
I totally see that.
when we think about who is a person and who isn't, how does waste mediate those things? You can have waste insist upon your personhood. I think about the dirty protests in Ireland, with the Irish political prisoners who would smear their excrement into these decorations on walls, who would use it as a
Mm,
protest, who use it literally as a protest medium. And
interesting.
I think about how there was an insistence on a kind of, you will never ignore my personhood because of this material that comes out of me that you will never be able to deny. And how we use waste to unperson people, how we use the logics of waste to make people into discarded things, or into usefully discarded things that can then be reintegrated in ways
Sure.
that support the system but don't really support human life in meaningful ways.
Yeah, it makes the the copro a really important, if not ancillary, then sort of like maybe it's a different way of thinking about the necropolitics, because
Yes.
necropolitics is very, there's a certain violence to that. There's a certain, almost a joy in the killing, uh, but I think maybe the copro is actually a more apt metaphor for how a lot of this gets actually dealt with culturally. Is that it's not that I want to violently murder anyone. I just don't want to see them. I don't
Yeah,
want
I
I
don't
don't
see
want
you. I
I
want
don't
to
want I don't
finish.
wanna see
Yeah.
you. I want you to be the NPC off screen, do your thing. I don't wanna talk about it. I just want my life to be okay.
Right. But I saw when I was coming up with the concept, or when I was developing this notion of the copper political, I saw it as a subset of the necropolitical.
Hmm,
And in some ways it is no less violent, because the bodies that are discarded are, especially when we think about about economies of e-waste,
sure,
they are, the depredation is definitely violent. I think about, it's not even slow violence like Rob Nixon's book instructs us about the environmentalism of the poor. It's really, damage to this person's body of the kind that was cataloged by Toby Miller and Maxwell by Miller and Maxwell in Greening the Media.
right,
So it's all the diseases, all of the injuries, all these different things that the hollowing out of a person, using Warwick Anderson's crap on the map example that I like to invoke a lot when I do this kind of work. It has its own kind of violence, but it's a violence that is a subset that's far more related in some ways to abjection than to
mhm,
the kinds of devastating movements of the state to eliminate life, and to determine, okay, so we're not going to bomb you into oblivion, and do so cheerfully because it protects protects our
sure.
sovereignty. Instead, it's this it may seem less directly violent, but it is no less violent. But it's a subset, I think, of the necropolitical, because of course,
Sure.
what happens when you determine that someone is waste? They're either reincorporated into the system or they become extraneity that you must purge.
Yeah.
And so that purgation can be, and also the characterization of people. I'm thinking about dangerous speech and how characterizing people as vermin or as waste is
Sure.
a move that can lead directly to interpersonal violence. It's not that far of a stretch, but I see them
No.
not even as cousins. I see that the copper political owes its is a subset or is a component of the necropolitical.
So where are you taking this work next? You're working in video games, and cyberspace, or what's are you continuing to work in that area, or are there other
Yeah.
places you're taking the copro political?
I am working on a book project, and this is going to be a
Okay.
small part of it. It's a larger book on digital cultures and waste and their fascination with it. I'll be working in avenues of shame. I'll be thinking a lot about bodily fluids, since there are quite a few interesting memes that are circulating or that have always circulated in digital subcultures that are truly, truly gross. And so I'll be able to work with those, which is going to be fun. I'm going to be thinking a lot about shit posting quite a bit. I mean, I have
I
a
hadn't
whole
put that
thing.
together, but
Yeah,
that's
shit
good.
posting. It's shit posting and junk shots. I'm thinking about
All
those
right.
types of things together. And I'm thinking about I'm gonna be this book project is coming together, I think in a way that I'm really happy with. So it's my hope to have a draft done next year.
Well, we'll have to, if we're still here, we'll talk about that then.
Yes, hopefully.
Well, so you also have what we might call a day job. You've recently moved to the James Madison University to take the role of Director of African American and Diaspora Studies. Um, so what does this work? What does the center do, particularly now that you've taken the helm? Or I don't know if you call it a helm. Do you consider a helm? Do you have a helm, or is it
It's more of
a
a network.
dashboard? A network.
More of a
Okay. All right.
network. And the center is to be the organizing element of that network. So
Okay.
we sit at the way the center is currently organized is we have two full-time staff, me and my admin. We have student workers who come in and do various projects, and we have over 65 affiliate faculty that teach our
Wow.
courses and that do also some work with helping us organize our conference, organizing workshops, and we have a number of those. Our big marquee events, we have two of our conferences. So we have our annual interdisciplinary conference that happens in February, and we have in the February-March region a accountability in African public policy and administration conference, and we have
Interesting.
monthly workshops, the Africana Studies workshop, which incubates incomplete work. And so if you're interested in participating in that and offering an incomplete piece that has to do with Black studies or Africana studies, then I would welcome you into that space. So feel free to contact me if you're interested in incubating a piece of unfinished work. We do protect privacy. We are very guarded with how we conduct those conversations to make sure that your work is protected. We have really interesting relationships with student groups. I believe in creating spaces of Black joy. So we do game nights with Make Your Mark on Madison. I'm hoping to take some of these game nights virtual, and so to do some video game night
Nice.
with folks. That'd be kind of nice to do. But for now, we play cornhole and we play with Lego. We play with Legos.
Nice.
We attend regularly the Harrisonburg Rockingham African American Festival will be our first marquee event of the incoming year. We have a very, very rich relationship with one of our alumni associations. We have two that we treasure, and the first is the old school, and the second is the Black alumni chapter. So between us three, we offer mentorship opportunities for students. We offer internship opportunities for students. We try really hard to create spaces of community and of being able to find the right mentors that can lead you along the path that you are meant to walk. So we have several events that we use to do that, some of which take place over our homecoming weekend when we have a lot of alumni come back, and they do give
Nice.
back to the university. We also celebrate Black History Month with our alumni group. So we'll be having a heritage performance festival kind of small thing in February, right around
Nice.
the time of our conference. So if you do attend our conference, which we hold both virtually as well as in person in the Shenandoah Valley, you're of course welcome to come. And I would love it if I had some CSA folk who would be who will say, yes, I'm from the CSA, so that I can begin cross-pollinating and we can start having
Nice.
synergy between our two rather different but still very closely associated endeavors. So we have our festival. We will be commemorating Kwibuka 33, which is the 33rd anniversary of the Rwandan genocide, with our Rwandan community. So that'll be happening in April. And we will be amplifying our study abroad programs. We have several that are in Africa. One of our flagship programs is to Ghana. And it has, it's both, we have a winter program, we've got a summer program. So what we've been doing is we've been heavily recruiting for our summer experience in Ghana. So the center has been putting
Nice.
a lot of weight behind that. And we have, of course, our International Model African Union. I have to give a shout out to them. AAAD subsidizes that particular adventure for our students, and we win prizes when we go. So
Nice.
yeah, so we do that. We have a research mission, and we've been finding it challenging to undertake that only because there was that radical change in what we were able to apply for at the federal level, and that of course has made the work at for foundation grants to be very competitive. So we've been working on trying to get some grants to fund some faculty projects in things like coastal resiliency. We've been thinking about work in artificial intelligence and sociality, thinking about how we can rethink intelligence itself by using
Right.
Africana concepts of personhood and of wisdom and of knowledge to sort of redistribute some of the energies that currently move AI. So we've been thinking about that. We've been thinking about Black maternal health and rural health. So we have some projects there. We've been thinking about diversifying medical professions. And so we've got projects that are associated with that. So we're looking to get some funding to be able to keep those kinds of projects going and to help our faculty launch some things that they're interested in doing. We want to do book brunches to celebrate research. So I've got a
Nice.
pretty busy year. We have a guest. We do have a visiting scholar, Kofi Akpabli, from who's also a Ghanaian column. I think he's a columnist. He's a journalist that
Mm.
he will be visiting us for a semester and delivering 2 public lectures for us. So we've got a lot going on. It's a
Sounds that way.
pretty busy place.
Yes, it sounds very busy.
Yeah.
And you kind of hinted at something just now, and I know you've written a bit about, I think in collaboration with a former student, about the status and function of so-called DEI in academic settings. And I think you used a kind of ludic lens to describe that. You talk about it as playing a game. Has this game become riskier in the last 2 years? And how has the administration at the college or the state government in Virginia help to magnify or mitigate that risk?
Well, that particular essay, it was prompted by the experience of the collaborator that I wrote it with, Christopher Thomas, who's a PhD student at Old Dominion University. And he had some experiences that translated very well into a ludic explanation of how DEI can go, how it can work from the vantage point of the marginalized people it's supposed to help, but who end up feeling alienated from the very processes that are supposed to center them.
Right.
So that ludic understanding, it allowed us to literally play with what was going on with that experience with him. And so that was really generative to write. It reminds me of or rather, that essay was validated in some ways by a recent article that just came out in The Atlantic, where a previous professor from
Mm.
Bates College was discussing what it meant to be tokenized by the very people and forces that were supposed to be working on his behalf. And so
Right.
our article really conjoins, I think, in interesting ways with that particular conversation, where it becomes where DEI can become whiteness talking to itself. Where
Hmm.
wokeness doesn't have anything really to do with LGBT or disabled people, or with Black people, or with other marginalized folks. It really doesn't. Wokeness doesn't have anything to do with us. It is a conversation that whiteness is having with itself, where one polarity of whiteness is anti-woke and the other polarity of whiteness is woke. That ends up becoming the tension, because what, who gets left out of the conversation? I'm not woke, I'm just Black. So that becomes that's the reason why DEI has been hampered, I think, why it had been getting in its own way at the time that we wrote the article. Since then, the work has become riskier and yet even more necessary. Apologies, that was my ringtone. And it's Shit Luck by Modest Mouse, by the way, is
Okay. All right.
my apologies for that. But it's become riskier for some people to do this work. It's become riskier for the people who are actually doing it.
Right.
It actually presents real risk of being doxxed, or real risk of being harassed, but not defended by the institutions that at one time had pledged to defend the work. That, I think, is the most discouraging thing about it, is the withdrawal of protections, of any kind of protections, any kind of faith in that particular, in the work that we need to do to protect people.
Right.
We are no longer protected by institutions at all. If ever we really were, it revealed the hollowness of that protection as well, I think, which was what makes it very risky. It's work I wish we didn't have to do. It's exposing, if you are untenured, if you are in a state of precarity, the discouragement against doing it is very real, because you will lose your job. And even if you show up in the news, you may not have any recourse to be able to get your job back. We've seen some pretty high profile instances of folks who've been able to defend their jobs because of they've had the protection of tenure, or they've had the protection of, this went against my First Amendment rights, or this went against the policies and procedures that the university has set for separating employees. So you had some people who have managed to win, but on the other hand, I mean, who really wants to put their paycheck and their families at risk when it's when it boils down to a principle that may or may not even directly impact me? And that's, of course, up and down the line. So it has become riskier, and it's become riskier in ways that I sympathize with, but also I have no choice but to live it. So you got to say something. You just have to be measured, I think, in terms of what you say and what you do, and pick the hills that you're really willing to die on. So it has become riskier. That said, in terms of how JMU has handled it, JMU has tried really hard, I think, and here I speak not as the administrator of a unit, I speak purely as a citizen in the world and as a fellow faculty member who has watched these movements. I will speak as an administrator in a minute, because I can do so from the vantage point of my post as the director of the center. But speaking as a faculty member, JMU sought to fly beneath the radar. I mean, we stand in the shadow of UVA pretty much literally. It's right up the road in Charlottesville, and we're about maybe an hour or so outside of it in the Shenandoah Valley. So we have that shadow literally cast over us. So when we were watching what was going on at UVA, we were noting it with some dismay. We were looking at what's happening at Virginia Tech and George Mason, and happily, that did not happen at JMU. We did not have any high-level state officials poking around in our syllabi directly. We didn't have folks who were going through our websites directly and telling the institution that it had to change X, Y, or Z. The danger was, would we do that ourselves in anticipatory compliance with ill-formed, ill-thought-out orders that we did not necessarily understand? Now I can speak as the administrator of a unit. I will speak as the center director. The Dear Colleague letter was deeply disturbing. When that came out, we were very worried.
And this is the one from the Department of Education, back when
Yes.
there was a Department of Education.
Yes, when they came out and said that race can have no impact on anybody's life whatsoever, and people were shutting down, they were shutting down units, they were closing programs. We were able to stand behind the line of curriculum, because at the time our acting provost had decided, he basically said, there's a big bright line, and curriculum is that line. Behind that lies academic freedom and freedom of inquiry. And so because we have a minor and we have an internship program that has hitched the curriculum, we are able to stand behind that line, and we are nested in the College of Arts and Letters. So we are within we are housed within academic affairs. We are an academic center. So we were able to claim certain protections. That is not the universal experience of a lot of different places. So when we think about other programs that were shuttered, they didn't get to have a certain kind of refuge that we were able to, that we were able to avail ourselves of, that a lot of, we had protections that were given, but how durable is that when you have changes in personnel, when you have folks who move around and who may or may not have the same level of beneficence? It was scary. It was actually it was a frightening time, but we were able to keep our head down and do the work. I mean, we continued offering events. We continued offering our conference. Our conference's theme was reckoning. At one point,
Mm.
we had a conference that was themed reckoning. Last year's conference was sanctuary was our keyword. So
Mm.
we thought about shelter a lot, in part because we had actually been able to receive a bit, but that it was not an easy time. And there were some hard discussions that were had about, well, what happens if they come after our funding? What happens if they
Right.
come after the center? What happens if they don't renew our charter? What happens to us? And so the governing bodies of the center, our internal advisory board, and we had very frank conversations that I think were really generative. And we came up with a strategy. And so far the strategy has worked. Do the work. And when they come at you,
Nice.
have a strategy to keep doing it anyway. And make a place for we can use the discipline to defend the integrity of whatever it is we do. That is what we do at my center. The disciplines that we work
Nice.
into, those actually are the source of the integrity of all the work that we do. And of course, the students themselves, and being able to offer them a rich and supportive experience. They're the reason why we do everything that we do. So knowing that we had those two things at our back, we were
Right.
able to weather, I think, in a way that some of our other sister programs weren't able to. And we have Furious Flower as our big sister center here on campus. It is the first academic
Curious flower.
Furious Flower. I'm giving a shout out to Lauren Elaine and to Joanne Gavin. Joanne Gavin is the founder, and Lauren Elaine is the current executive director, and they are the first academic center for the study of Black poetry in the U.S., and they're housed here at
Okay.
JMU. So we were able to walk hand in hand with them in a lot of ways to weather these times. And so we've also formed some very generative friendships and different kinds of partnerships around campus. The libraries is a big partner of ours. We've received support from the Office of the President, who sees what we do and values it. So we've been very lucky, very fortunate. That said, I would be interested in seeing other centers like mine that protect Muslim studies, Jewish
Sure.
studies, Asian studies. I want to see more centers like mine show up here so that they too can show up and allow people to do the work for populations that I may not be necessarily part of, that my umbrella doesn't cover as explicit
Right.
um, or as directly. So that's been our experience here at JMU. It has been harrowing, but not damning.
Yeah.
But
Which is a low bar, but
it's a low bar, but
it's
we clear
about where
it.
we're getting right now, right?
Well, I like to say that I'm never disappointed because I keep my expectations modest.
Sure.
Is if your expectations on the floor, there's no lower you can go. So, but I think that, given the fact that we are a conservative campus, that we are PWI, that we did manage to protect our Center for Multicultural Student Services. So we protected them. They were actually able to receive an increase in funding instead of being defunded. Some of their spaces changed in ways that I think were experienced very differently by different populations on campus. So that it's not a completely spotless record, but I think that we came out of it with certain spaces intact that we thought for sure were not going to be protected at all. But that said, what does it mean to live in an era where you must rely on the kindness of an
Yeah.
institution to protect
Yeah.
you?
Well, and whoever happens to be leading it at that particular moment.
and who happens to be in place at that particular time.
Yeah.
That's the scariest thing I think about it is you have to rely too much on norms that have been shown to have failed us.
Yeah.
So that's what I can say from both my vantage point as a faculty member and also as a director.
Well, I'm glad that the story has mostly gone well so far, and hopefully the conclusion, if there is one, there isn't a conclusion. I hope it just keeps going,
I
and
hope
the
you
story
both.
keeps going well.
Thank you.
But you are also now the president of the Cultural Studies Association. Is it a great scholarly association or the greatest scholarly association?
It is in my heart the greatest. It is the greatest of the greatest.
When did
I
you start coming to the conference, and how have you been involved since then?
goodness, I think I started coming, I want to say like in 2011. My
Okay.
dissertation director, Sangeeta Ray, is one of the
Mm.
founding people who actually helped
Yeah,
create
she was
this
the
conference.
president, maybe the third or fourth
Third or
president, maybe.
fourth. So she
Yeah.
and David Shumway worked to
Okay.
help create it. And so I think my very first, I think I was actually involved in one of the earliest conferences because she brought me in as a GA to do some work and
Okay.
then fell away from it for a few years while I was getting my act together and writing my dissertation and being a romanticist at one point, but then lapsing and becoming a post-colonialist. And then I rediscovered y'all, well, the y'all then I want to say like 2011 or 2012, something like that.
Okay.
And when I first rediscovered the conference, it was actually Michelle, our admin and our fearless, what do we call her? She's our
She has a new title. I
backbone.
think she is associate executive director now.
Yes. So our associate
Is her title.
Yes, our associate executive director who was helping us make the conference happen. She had been laboring doing something or other, and I just put my hands on help. And ever since then, I've not taken my hands off. I came at the institution of the CSA wanting to get involved and wanting to help it function. I like to build things, and I believe very strongly in leadership from a point of service, leadership that is through service and through serving. So getting involved, you guys kind of entertained me in terms of my desires to do stuff and to just, I was on the policy committee, helping with our anti-discrimination policy. And then I think I was on the board at that point too. I'd been sort of welcomed onto the board as just sort of a member doing things. And then at some point you put your faith in me to be able to actually lead us, which was it was very validating.
Well, and in between that, I want to just to give people an idea of what it looks like. Dolores has been instrumental in several of the virtual and hybrid conferences. This is her at the George Mason University conference, and you can see the Discord channel on the screen, keeping up with the Discord channel. And then it looks like we have maybe 6 or 7 concurrent
Yep.
Zoom rooms here that you are managing at the same time. So
Yes. Oh my God. I
this is
love
the
virtual
HQ. This is the HQ. These are hybrid rooms. So upstairs there were like people in real rooms with cameras, and then there are also people virtually watching this. So this was Dolores and I did a lot of this, but Dolores has been instrumental in keeping these running, and we have another one coming up.
Yes, we do. And Sean, please do not hide your light under a barrel, my friend. You have been just absolutely Herculean in hoisting these virtual conferences on your brawny shoulders and carrying them across the finish line. I love hosting the conference. I love virtual hosting. I love actual hosting. I love, in-person hosting. I just love that we were able to draw together people who are sharing their brilliance and renewing old friendships, making meeting new colleagues, generating wonderful projects. I see our place as facilitating that. So it's been really an honor to be helpful in the most material ways to making that happen, which is sometimes sitting in front of 5 computers, making sure nothing
Yeah.
breaks. But yeah. And I know
helping
Discord
random
has its
people.
problems. We're gonna probably locate a different friendlier platform for our interim hosting. So yeah,
Sure. Someday.
someday we'll figure it out.
We have all the rooms set up right now, so it's easier to and there's
Yes,
some
we do.
inertia. There's some
Yes.
inertia. And really this past year, it really, I mean, I think proof of concept, we had people from all over the world joining us. Some of them very late at night because they were in other, in Australia or South Asia. Um, but it made it so that you could really have a global conference at the
Yeah.
same time, and people, especially when you can't travel, and nobody wants to come to the U.S. right now
Oh yeah, nobody
if they
wants
don't
to.
have to. So,
Yeah. I remember one of the very first things that I said to Toby when he was president and I was coming on board. I think he was vice president at the time, and I was coming on board as a desiring to get involved with with the organization, was that I wanted the CSA to be a global entity. I thought it would be valuable for us to have global reach and to be
mhm.
able to have exactly the kind of reach that you're talking about, where we have folks from Australia who are presenting, we have folks from all over the place who are sharing their knowledge and participating in our networks and building out the CSA. So I've always thought it valuable to use technology to go global. So I'm really excited about that. We're seeing it actually happening, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you're one of the people in the driver's seat. So,
Well, for a very short time, I'm already in my first year as president,
yeah,
and those 2 years go by very quickly. I watched it happen to Rob, so it's like you blink and you're no longer. I'm sure it happened to you. You felt like you wake up one day, you're president, the next day it's time
yeah,
to
happens
pass the
quick.
hat.
Well, do you
Uh,
have any other so going global, any other hopes or aspirations for your time as president?
Making the conference as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. That goes hand in hand with the technology, but there is a digital divide that's very real.
Mhm.
But we want to make sure that we're able to reach you, whether you are an artist or somebody who is working off the tenure line, somebody who's in a state of precarity, a graduate student. We want you to be able to feel like you're part of this community too. So I want to know what will maximize accessibility for people to be able to participate. That said, we do have our in-person conference, which can present its challenges for some folks. We try to lower those barriers. So if we can do a better job of that, please, I'm all ears. You'll find that I love to listen to new ideas, and my favorite two words in the English language are "let's try." So if you have anything that you want us to think about taking up, we've got a new book prize that we're currently doing, which is fantastic. We have different types of initiatives that you can get involved in. We're always looking for folks who are willing to govern, who are willing to come in and step in and get their hands dirty. So if you're interested in becoming a member of the governing board, please feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to hear from you and welcome you aboard to make this organization as great, the greatest of the
The
greatest of
greatest.
the greatest.
And, we're working on the CFP now, so hopefully in the next month or so, we'll have something more to share,
Yes,
on that front.
yes.
So,
It's currently,
well
yeah, it's currently in process, but it will be out very shortly.
well, great. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and I'm looking forward to working with you as president and, hearing more about the shit you're working on as
Well,
it comes together.
well, thank you for entertaining my shit. I
Yeah,
appreciate
you bet.
that you have welcomed me so warmly into the space with you and your listeners, and it's my hope that I've giving us a little bit to chew on. Ha ha
Oh,
ha.
I know that I don't feel like eating it right now, but well, yeah, but thank you so much. And next week we'll be speaking with several authors of essays in the latest issue of the for Democratic Communications journal, Democratic Communique. These articles are on academic freedom. Actually, a couple of folks from George Mason University who led the kind of resistance there against the kind of forces that you're talking about will be joining us, as well as someone who's written on some pro-Palestinian campus movements in the U.S. and Canada. So if you're joining us on YouTube, it'll be streaming there again. This episode will also be available on the Breaking Culture Live YouTube channel. Please share it with your colleagues and let us know if you have ideas for future episodes or invitees by emailing us at breakingculturelive@gmail.com. So thanks again for joining us. I'm Sean Johnson Andrews. Please check out my Substack at breakingculture.substack.com. And until next time, take care.